My stitches tore as my heart broke. The pain was a white-hot fire, ripping through my abdomen where the surgeons had just pieced me back together. But it was nothing compared to the agony of his hand clamped around my arm, dragging me from the hospital bed. Hours. It had only been hours since I had given birth to 10 baby girls. 10 tiny, perfect souls whose first sounds were now drowned out by their father's rage. NHE didn't see them as miracles. He saw them as a curse. A failure. My failure. "Get up," he snarled, his voice a low growl that promised violence. "You think you can just lie here? After what you've done?" What I had done was survive a high-risk pregnancy, enduring months of sickness and fear to bring his children into the world. What I had done was undergo major surgery to deliver them safely. But in his eyes, my only accomplishment was producing 10 daughters instead of the one son he craved. NTHE thin hospital gown offered no protection as he hauled me toward the door, my bare feet stumbling on the cold, sterile floor. I could hear the frantic beeping of the monitors I'd been ripped away from. I could hear a nurse shouting somewhere down the hall, but all I could see was the row of incubators on the far side of the room, 10 little bundles wrapped in pink, their faces small and fragile. My daughters. I hadn't even held one of them yet. NHE shoved me against the wall, his face inches from mine, his breath hot with fury. 10 of them, he spat, as if the number itself was an insult. Useless, all of them. And a searing pain shot through me, and I cried out, my hand flying to my stomach. I felt a damp warmth spreading through the thin fabric of my gown. Blood. My stitches had given way. But he didn't stop. He didn't even look down. His grip only tightened, his knuckles white. In that moment, a terrifying clarity washed over me. This wasn't just disappointment. This was hatred. He hated them for being girls, and he hated me for creating them. I looked past his shoulder, my eyes desperately searching for my babies, my 10 tiny girls, who were all alone. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he wasn't just going to leave me. He was going to make sure I lost them too. This was not the end of his cruelty. This was just the beginning. NHEY. Everyone, if this story is already hitting you hard, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss what happens next. Your support means the world to me. Now, let's get back to it. And the gilded cage NMY life with Liam hadn't always been a nightmare. It began as a fairy tale, or at least a very convincing imitation of one. I met him at a charity gala my former boss had dragged me to. I was a junior archivist at a city museum, a quiet girl who preferred the company of dusty relics to loud parties. He was Liam Sterling, a name synonymous with old money and new power. He moved through the glittering crowd with an easy grace, a man who had never been told no in his life. When his eyes landed on me, I felt like a moth caught in a spotlight. He crossed the room, ignoring the heiresses and socialites vying for his attention, and stopped right in front of me. "You look lost," he said, his smile both charming and predatory. I should have seen it for what it was then, but I was too mesmerized. He spoke of art, of history, of forgotten places. He made my quiet life sound like a fascinating adventure. Our courtship was a whirlwind of private jets, Michelin-star dinners, and lavish gifts. He swept me off my feet so completely that I never had a chance to look down and see how high and precarious my position was. My parents, simple, hardworking people, were bewildered by him. "He seems intense," my mother had said, her brow furrowed with a worry I dismissed as provincial. I was in love, or so I thought. In reality, I was being acquired. NWE married 6 months later in a ceremony so grand it was featured in magazines. I moved into his ancestral mansion, a sprawling stone edifice that felt more like a museum than a home. It was beautiful, but it was cold. The silence in its long hallways was heavy, broken only by the ticking of ancient clocks. I soon learned that this was my gilded cage. Liam didn't want a partner. He wanted a possession, a beautiful, quiet wife to complete the picture of his perfect life, NTHE first crack in the facade appeared when we started talking about children. For him, it was never a question of if, but when, and more importantly, what. He spoke of a son, an heir, with an unnerving fervor. A sterling boy, he'd say, staring into the fireplace, to carry on the name, to inherit all of this. He never once mentioned a daughter. When I gently raised the possibility, his smile tightened. The first one must be a boy, he stated, as if issuing a corporate directive. It's a matter of tradition. I got pregnant within a year. Liam was ecstatic. He controlled everything: my diet, my exercise, my social schedule. He hired a team of the best doctors, not for my well-being, but to ensure the heir was developing perfectly. The pressure was immense. I felt like a vessel, my body no longer my own. When the ultrasound technician revealed we were having a girl, the temperature in the room dropped by 20 degrees. Liam's face became a mask of cold fury. He didn't speak a word to me for a week. Our daughter, Isabella, was born into a house that felt like a tomb. He was civil to her, but distant, his affection reserved for a son who did not exist. NTHE next few years were a repeating cycle of hope and disappointment. I gave birth to another daughter, then another. With each girl, Liam's resentment grew, coiling like a snake in the heart of our home. He stopped pretending to be pleased. His words became sharp, his touch non-existent. He started spending more time at his office, at his club, anywhere but with me and his failures. I was failing him in my one essential duty. My daughters, beautiful, bright, wonderful girls, were treated like ghosts in their own home, their laughter a sound he couldn't stand. I poured all my love into them, trying to shield them from his chilling indifference, but I knew they felt it. They saw the way he looked through them. When I became pregnant for the 4th time, the pressure was unbearable. I prayed for a boy, not for myself, but to simply stop the emotional torment, to bring peace to my home. The doctor's appointment was a blur of anxiety. I lay on the table, my heart pounding, as the ultrasound wand glided over my stomach. The doctor was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the screen. Then he turned to me, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "Mrs. Sterling," he began, his voice hushed, "this is highly unusual. I've never seen anything like it in my career." He paused, taking a deep breath. "You're not carrying one baby, or 2, or even 3. He turned the screen towards me. It was filled with tiny, flickering heartbeats. 10 of them. "You're pregnant with decuplets, and from what I can see, they are all girls." NTHE news hit me like a physical blow. 10 more daughters. 10 more reasons for him to hate me. I should have felt joy, a sense of wonder at the miracle growing inside me. But all I felt was a cold, creeping dread. I knew, with absolute certainty, that this miracle would be the thing that finally destroyed us. In a house of whispers. Bringing the news to Liam was the hardest thing I had ever done. I found him in his study, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound books he never read. He was swirling a glass of expensive whiskey, his back to the door. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and his simmering anger. "Liam," I began, my voice barely a whisper, "I have news from the doctor." NHE didn't turn around. "Is it a boy this time? Or have you failed me again?" NHI's words were like daggers, but I steeled myself. "It's more complicated than that." I took a shaky breath. "We're having 10 babies, Liam. Decuplets." NTHE glass in his hand stopped moving. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, he slowly turned, his face unreadable. 10? He repeated, the word flat and devoid of emotion. I nodded, my hands twisting in my lap. "And they're all girls." NTHE mask shattered. A dark, terrifying rage contorted his features. He didn't shout. He didn't yell. He did something far worse. He laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound that echoed off the high ceilings. A laugh, completely empty of humor. It was a sound of something breaking. 10 more, he said, his voice dangerously soft. You are determined to mock me, aren't you? To fill this house with useless mouths to feed. To erase my legacy with a flood of daughters. He took a step towards me, his eyes burning with a cold fire. This is your fault. Your weakness. Your failure. From that day on, the house became a prison of whispers and shadows. Liam sealed himself off from me completely. He moved into a separate wing of the mansion, communicating only through his staff. The pregnancy was brutal. My body, already strained, was pushed to its absolute limit. I was put on mandatory bed rest, a prisoner in my own lavish bedroom, attended by nurses who spoke in hushed tones and avoided my gaze. They saw the truth. They saw the cold cruelty of my husband, the man who refused to even enter the room of the wife, carrying 10 of his children. My only solace was my 3 older daughters. Isabella, now 7, would sneak into my room, her younger sisters trailing behind her. They would climb onto the bed, their small hands resting gently on my enormous belly. They'd talk to their unborn sisters, telling them stories, singing them songs. Don't worry, Mama, Isabella would whisper, her eyes wise beyond her years. We'll help you. We'll be strong for them. They were my lifeline, their love, a tiny flame in the suffocating darkness of that house. NTHE world outside saw a different story. Liam, ever the master of public relations, spun a tale of a miraculous pregnancy, of a devoted husband caring for his fragile wife. He gave interviews, his face a mask of paternal concern, speaking of the blessing of our enormous family. He donated to hospitals, established foundations for multiple birth families. He was building a fortress of public goodwill around himself, a fortress I knew was designed to imprison me. No one would ever believe the quiet, fragile wife of the great philanthropist Liam Sterling if she dared to speak out against him. He was making me invisible. NTHE day of the delivery was a blur of controlled chaos. An entire wing of the hospital was reserved. A team of specialists was assembled. Liam was there, of course, not for me, but for the cameras that had gathered outside. He played the part of the anxious father perfectly, his hand briefly touching my shoulder for a photo op before he recoiled as if burned. NTHE surgery was long and arduous. One by one, my daughters were brought into the world, their tiny cries filling the operating room. 10 perfect, healthy baby girls. The medical team was jubilant, calling it a modern miracle. I was weak, drifting in and out of consciousness, but my heart swelled with a fierce, protective love. I had done it. I had brought them here safely. I was moved to a private recovery room, the 10 incubators lined up against the wall like a row of precious jewels. I remember asking for them, my voice hoarse. Please, let me hold one. A kind-faced nurse was about to lift a baby into my arms when the door flew open. Liam stood there, his expensive suit unwrinkled, his face a thundercloud of pure rage. The facade was gone. There were no cameras here. There was only me, my 10 newborn daughters, and his unadulterated hatred. They're all girls, he said, his voice shaking with disgust. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. NTHAT was when he strode to my bedside. That was when he grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into the soft flesh around the IV line. That was when he dragged me out of the bed, just hours after my surgery, as my world dissolved into a symphony of pain and breaking stitches. The alliance of the unseen NTHE nurse's scream was what saved me. It cut through my pain-filled haze and seemed to momentarily startle Liam, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Other staff came running, their faces horrified at the scene before them. The city's most celebrated philanthropist standing over his bleeding post-operative wife, his face contorted with rage. Liam, ever the performer, immediately shifted. He released my arm, stepping back and raising his hands as if to show his innocence. She's hysterical, he said, his voice smooth and laced with false concern. The stress, the hormones, She tried to get out of bed on her own. I was only trying to help her back. NTHE lie was so audacious, so seamless, it almost worked. But the head nurse, a woman named Maria with eyes that had seen everything, wasn't buying it. She knelt beside me, her voice firm but gentle. "Get a gurney now," paged Dr. Evans. "Code blue." She looked directly at Liam, her gaze like ice. "Mr. Sterling, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Your wife needs immediate medical attention." NFOR a moment. I saw a flash of fury in his eyes, the urge to assert his power. But he was outnumbered. With a final, venomous glare at me, he turned and strode out of the room, composing his face back into a mask of worried dignity for the audience in the hallway. And I was rushed back into surgery. The damage was severe. My internal stitches had torn, causing significant bleeding. As they put me under again, my last conscious thought was of my daughters. He had tried to take me from them. He had left me to die. When I woke up, Maria was sitting by my bed. The room was quiet. The incubators were gone. A wave of panic washed over me. "My babies," I rasped. "Where are my babies?" "They're safe," Maria said, her hand covering mine. "They're in the NICU. They are strong, beautiful girls, and they are being watched over. No one can get to them without my permission." She looked at me, her expression serious. "I know what he did, Elena. I saw his face before he had time to lie. I've been a nurse for 30 years. I know abuse when I see it." Tears streamed down my face, tears of relief, of gratitude, of terror. For the first time, someone saw. Someone believed me. "He'll take them from me," I sobbed. "He has money, power. He'll tell everyone I'm crazy. He'll get custody and I'll never see them again." Maria's grip tightened. "Not if we're smart," she said, her voice low and determined. "He thinks you're weak. He thinks you're alone. We have to use that. We have to build an army in secret." And so the alliance began. Maria was the first soldier. She became my gatekeeper, my protector within the hospital walls. She documented everything: my injuries, Liam's fabricated story, the fear in my eyes. She controlled all access to me and my 10 daughters, citing medical reasons that Liam's lawyers couldn't fight. She bought us time. NMY's second ally was my older brother, David. He was a tech security expert, a quiet, unassuming man Liam had always dismissed as insignificant. When I called him, my voice trembling, and told him everything, his response was immediate. "I'm on my way. Don't say another word to anyone." He's probably listening. David arrived and immediately swept my hospital room for bugs. He found 3. One in the phone, one in the television, and a tiny one taped beneath the bed. Liam was already trying to build a case against me. David replaced them with his own devices, ones that would feed Liam's security team a loop of harmless hospital sounds. He then secured my personal phone and laptop, creating encrypted channels for us to communicate. "He's arrogant," David said, his fingers flying across a keyboard. "He'll use brute force and obvious methods because he doesn't think you're smart enough to anticipate them. We'll be smarter." NTHE final piece of our secret team was a woman named Evelyn Reed, a retired family law judge Maria knew from a domestic violence shelter she volunteered at. Evelyn had spent her career fighting for women like me. She agreed to meet me in secret, disguised as a hospital grief counselor. Evelyn was a small, bird-like woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. She listened to my entire story without interruption, from the first day I met Liam to the moment he dragged me from my bed. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "He's built a fortress, Elena," she said, "but every fortress has a weakness. His is his ego. His public image is his Achilles heel. A custody battle will be messy and public. He wants to avoid that. He'll try to prove you're an unfit mother quietly, behind the scenes, using his money and influence. So what do? I asked, my voice desperate. "You play his game," Evelyn replied, a faint, steely smile on her lips. "You go back to that house. You be the meek, broken wife he expects you to be. You let him think he's won. You let him think you're too terrified to fight back. And while you're playing the part, we will be gathering the evidence we need to tear his fortress down, brick by brick. NTHE plan was terrifying. Go back to him? To that house? But as I looked at the picture of my 13 daughters that Maria had taped to the wall beside my bed, I knew I had no choice. To win this war, I had to walk back into the lion's den. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. I would have my secret army. And I would be gathering my own weapons. The performance of a lifetime. Returning to the mansion was like willingly stepping into my own tomb. Liam had arranged for my discharge with a great public display of magnanimity. He arrived at the hospital with a fleet of cars and a team of private nurses, all for the benefit of the press. He stood by my wheelchair, his hand resting on my shoulder in a gesture of loving support, a gesture that made my skin crawl. His eyes, however, told a different story. They were cold, triumphant. He thought he had broken me. NHE was right. The old me, the quiet, hopeful girl who believed in fairy tales, was broken. But a new woman was forged in that breaking, a woman filled with a cold, hard resolve. My only goal was survival, for me and for my 13 daughters. The 10 babies came home to a state-of-the-art nursery Liam had constructed, not out of love, but as another prop in his performance. It was staffed around the clock by nurses he had hired, women whose loyalty was to his paycheck. I was allowed limited, supervised access to my own children. He claimed it was for my health, that I was too fragile to care for them. The truth was, he was isolating them from me, ensuring they would form no bond with their mother. He was erasing me from their lives before they even knew my face. And I played my part. I was the ghost of the mansion. I was quiet, submissive, and seemingly terrified of my own shadow. I flinched when he entered a room. I kept my eyes downcast. I spoke only when spoken to. I let him believe he had absolute power, that my spirit was crushed beyond repair. Every ounce of my being screamed in protest, but I held on to Evelyn's words. Let him think he's won. NMY 3 older daughters were my silent co-conspirators. I had to be careful. I knew the house was monitored. Our conversations were brief, coded. In the garden, away from listening ears, I told Isabella, we have to be actors for a while. We have to be strong by being quiet. Do you understand? She nodded, her young face grim. She understood. She had been watching him her whole life. She and her sisters became my eyes and ears, reporting on the nurses, conversations, on Liam's visitors, on the new security cameras that seemed to appear overnight. Meanwhile, my brother David worked from the shadows. He had discovered that Liam's entire life was a meticulously constructed lie. His old money was actually new, acquired through a series of ruthless, borderline illegal corporate takeovers. He had ruined dozens of smaller companies, leaving families destitute while he built his empire. He had skeletons in his closet, and David was methodically picking the locks. David taught me how to find the blind spots in Liam's surveillance. A small bathroom on the ground floor. A section of the old library's shelves. In these brief, stolen moments, I would use a burner phone David had given me to speak with Evelyn. I fed her everything I could. The names of the nurses, the schedules they kept, Liam's rants about his business rivals, his casual cruelty, his complete and utter disinterest in any of his 13 daughters. NMY's biggest breakthrough came one night when Liam had a private meeting in his study. He thought I was asleep, sedated by the medication his private doctor prescribed, which I had been cleverly pretending to take. I crept down the hallway, my heart pounding with every creak of the floorboards. The door was thick, but I pressed my ear against it, catching snippets of the conversation. He was talking to his lawyer. We just need to keep her stable for another 6 months. Liam was saying, build the case, the journals from the nurses, the doctor's testimony. By the time we file, any judge will see she's mentally incompetent. She'll be committed, and I'll have sole custody. The tragic story of a woman broken by a difficult pregnancy, the public will eat it up. I felt the blood run cold in my veins. A psychiatric facility. He was going to have me locked away. He wasn't just going to take my children. He was going to erase my existence. And I backed away from the door, my breath catching in my throat. I made it back to my room, my body trembling uncontrollably. The mask of the meek, broken wife was slipping. The rage was so immense, so powerful, I thought it would consume me. But then I looked at the photo of my girls, and the rage cooled, hardening into something else. Determination. NHE had given me a deadline. 6 months. The clock was ticking. My performance had to be flawless. I had to endure the whispers, the isolation, the chilling presence of the man who was methodically planning my destruction. I had to smile while he sharpened the knife, because at the end of those 6 months, only one of us would be left standing. And it wasn't going to be him. The cracks in the Fortress NTHE next few months were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I lived every day under a microscope, knowing every word, every sigh, every tear was being recorded and cataloged to be used against me. The nurses Liam hired were his spies. They documented my mood swings, my grief, my paranoia, my justifiable fear, and my detachment, my forced separation from my children. I knew their reports were painting a picture of a woman unraveling, a narrative Liam was carefully crafting for a judge. NBUT, they underestimated me. They underestimated my allies. And they vastly underestimated my older daughters. Isabella, my brilliant, watchful girl, became the leader of our small rebellion. She discovered that one of the younger nurses, a girl named Clara, was uncomfortable with the deception. Clara was fresh out of nursing school, and her sympathy for me was warring with her fear of Mr. Sterling. Isabella started leaving things for Clara to find, a drawing of our family, happy, from before the babies were born. One of my old art history books left open to a page about female artists who defied convention. Small, silent appeals to her conscience. NTHE turning point came when Clara witnessed Liam's cruelty firsthand. One of the babies, little Maya, was colicky and had been crying for hours. Liam stormed into the nursery, his face dark. "Can you not shut that thing up?" he demanded, his voice dripping with venom. "It's just noise. Take it to the other side of the house. I don't want to hear it." He didn't call her by her name. He called her it. NCLARA was shaken. Later that night, she found me in the garden, the one place I could sometimes find peace. "He doesn't love them," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "He doesn't love any of them." "No," I said quietly. "He doesn't." From that moment, Clara became our inside source. She was terrified, but her integrity won out. She started documenting the truth. She used her phone to secretly record Liam's tirades. She photographed the pages of the other nurses, falsified logs, showing how they exaggerated my symptoms. She became our most valuable asset, a crack in the fortress wall. Meanwhile, David was making his own progress. He had tracked down several of the business owners Liam had ruined. Most were too scared to speak out, but he found one man, a former tech entrepreneur named Marcus Thorne, whose life's work Liam had stolen and rebranded as his own. Marcus had been destroyed financially and personally, but he had kept meticulous records of Liam's predatory tactics. He had evidence of corporate espionage, blackmail, and fraud. He had been waiting for years for a chance to get justice. Nevelyn took this information and began to build our legal strategy. It was no longer just a custody case. It was becoming a full-blown criminal investigation. "We don't just want to win, Elena," she told me over our secure line. "We want to annihilate him. We need to expose the rot at the foundation of his empire. The custody of your daughters will be the first domino to fall." NMY's role in all of this was the most dangerous. I had to get my hands on Liam's personal server, which was kept in his locked study. It contained the originals of his illegal business dealings, the unedited recordings from the house, and, David suspected, correspondence with the judge he was planning to bribe. NTHE opportunity came when Liam announced he was hosting a major fundraising gala at the mansion. It was the pinnacle of his philanthropic charade. The house would be swarming with guests, press, and security. But for a few hours, all eyes would be on the party. NTHE night of the gala, I played my part to perfection. I wore a simple, elegant dress, my face pale, and my demeanor subdued. I was the tragic, beautiful wife, a subject of pity and gossip among the guests. Liam paraded me around for a short while before dismissing me, telling everyone I needed my rest. "She's so fragile," he'd say, with a sad shake of his head. And as soon as I was clear, I moved. David had remotely disabled the camera and alarm on the study door for a 10-minute window. Isabella and her sisters created a diversion, staging a loud, sisterly squabble in the upstairs hallway that drew the attention of the security guards stationed there. Clara covered for me with the other nurses. It was a coordinated, high-stakes operation, and I slipped into the study, my heart hammering against my ribs. The room was dark, the air cold. I found the server, a black, humming tower hidden behind a false panel. As David had instructed, I plugged in a small USB drive. A tiny light blinked as it began to copy gigabytes of data, years of his lies, his crimes, his cruelty, and it felt like an eternity. Every second stretched, filled with the fear of discovery. Finally, the light stopped blinking. I pulled the drive, slipped it into my pocket, and crept out of the study just as David reactivated the alarm. I made it back to my room with seconds to spare. I held the small drive in my hand. It was cold and heavy, the weight of my future. We had it. We had everything. The fortress was about to crumble. The Storm Breaks NTHE Day we chose to strike was the day Liam was scheduled to announce the new Sterling wing of the city hospital, the very hospital where he had assaulted me. It was the height of his hypocrisy, a monument to his public deception. Evelyn decided we would tear it all down at the moment of his greatest triumph. The plan was executed with military precision. At exactly 10 a.m., as Liam stepped up to the podium in front of a crowd of reporters and city officials, Evelyn filed an emergency petition for sole custody on my behalf, citing extreme domestic abuse and endangerment. The petition included Nurse Clara's sworn affidavit, my detailed medical reports, and the secret recordings of Liam's verbal abuse. Simultaneously, David released the contents of the USB drive. He didn't just send it to the police, he sent it to a select group of investigative journalists Marcus Thorne had vetted, journalists Liam couldn't buy or intimidate. He also sent it to the board of directors of Liam's company and to the SECNTHE. Storm broke instantly, and I watched it unfold on a television in the safe house Evelyn had arranged for me. My daughters were with me, all 13 of them. We had slipped out of the mansion in the pre-dawn hours, leaving behind the gilded cage for good. NTHE first sign was a reporter's phone buzzing in the front row of Liam's press conference. Then another, and another. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. An aide rushed onto the stage and whispered frantically in Liam's ear. I saw his face change. The confident, charming mask melted away, revealing the snarling, panicked man I knew so well. He abruptly ended the conference and fled the stage, hounded by a sudden barrage of questions he couldn't answer. "Mr. Sterling, is it true you're being investigated for fraud? What's your response to the allegations of spousal abuse? Did you steal the technology for your flagship product?" Within the hour, the story was everywhere. It was a tidal wave of scandal. The philanthropist was a fraud. The devoted husband was a monster. The Sterling empire was built on lies. NTHE fallout was catastrophic for him. His company's stock plummeted. The board of directors called an emergency meeting and suspended him. The hospital immediately canceled the dedication ceremony and returned his donation, publicly condemning him. His powerful friends who had flocked to his galas now refused to even take his calls. His fortress of reputation, so carefully constructed, had been leveled in a single morning. NTHE legal battles were swift and brutal. Faced with irrefutable evidence of fraud and a mountain of bad press, Liam's business partners turned on him to save themselves. He was indicted on multiple federal charges. But for me, the most important battle was in family court. NLIAM tried to fight. His lawyers attempted to paint me as a vindictive, unstable woman. But Evelyn was ready. She presented the evidence methodically, the recordings, the nurses, logs, Clara's testimony. The final, devastating blow was when she played the security footage from the hospital hallway on the day I was attacked, footage the hospital had handed over under subpoena. It showed Liam striding out of my room, his face a mask of rage, moments before I was wheeled out on a gurney, bleeding and unconscious. NTHE judge, a stern woman who looked at Liam with open contempt, didn't even need to deliberate. She granted me an immediate, permanent restraining order and sole, undisputed custody of all 13 of my daughters. His parental rights were terminated on the spot. He was a danger to me and to them. And I heard the news from Evelyn over the phone. I was sitting on the floor of our small, sunlit apartment, surrounded by my girls. The babies were cooing in their playpen, and my older daughters were helping me fold laundry. It was a scene of such simple domestic peace. "It's over, Elena," Evelyn said. "You're free." I hung up the phone and began to cry. Not tears of sadness or fear, but tears of profound, earth-shattering relief. My older girls rushed to my side, wrapping their arms around me. I pulled them close, my heart overflowing. The war was over. We had won. In the House of Light and Justice, I've learned, isn't always a single dramatic moment. Sometimes it's a quiet, steady rebuilding. Liam's downfall was swift and public. He was convicted of fraud and sentenced to a long prison term. He lost his company, his fortune, his name. He became a forgotten man, a cautionary tale whispered among the elite he once ruled. I never saw or heard from him again. For me and my daughters, life began anew. The world that had once seemed so terrifyingly large and hostile became a place of possibility. With a portion of the divorce settlement Evelyn secured for us, I bought a house. Not a mansion, not a cage of stone and shadows, but a rambling, cheerful house with a big garden and enough bedrooms for all of us. It was a house filled with sunlight, with clutter, with the constant, beautiful noise of my children's laughter. We called it the House of Light, NMY. Older girls blossomed. Freed from the weight of their father's disapproval, they discovered their passions. Isabella, my little leader, became a fierce debater and a champion for social justice, her voice strong and clear. My other girls excelled in art, in science, in music. They were brilliant, and for the first time, they were allowed to shine. In the babies, my 10 tiny miracles grew into 10 unique, vibrant, and fiercely loved little girls. I spent my days and nights surrounded by them, making up for every moment I had lost. I memorized their faces, the sound of their giggles, the feel of their small hands in mine. There was no greater fortune on earth. Nurse Clara became a part of our family, a beloved auntie to the girls. Marcus Thorne, the man whose evidence helped bring Liam down, established a foundation with David to help entrepreneurs fight back against corporate predators. We had forged a new family from the ashes of my old life. And one afternoon, a few years later, I was in the garden, watching my daughters play. The 10 youngest were chasing butterflies, their squeals of delight filling the air. Isabella, now a young woman on the verge of leaving for college, came and sat beside me. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked quietly. And I looked at the scene before me, at the joyful chaos, the unconditional love, the 13 incredible human beings I had the honor of calling my daughters. I thought of the cold, silent mansion and the man rotting in a prison cell, a prisoner of his own hatred. "No," I said, and I realized with a profound sense of peace that it was the truth. "I don't. He's not a part of our story anymore. NTHE slap. The stitches, the fear, they were all scars, but they no longer hurt. They were just a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. I hadn't just survived. I had triumphed. I had taken the life he tried to destroy and built a world of light and love from its ruins. He had wanted an heir to inherit his kingdom of darkness. Instead, he got 13 queens who built their own kingdom of light. And in the end, that was the most perfect justice of all.